In this video, I want to talk about fancy fonts. Fonts that I want to have that are creative, but not necessarily installed in everybody's machine. And here's what I mean by that. So I have an H1 tag that has my wedding company. And if I do a font family, then I can choose from pretty much everybody's basic standard fonts. These fonts are pretty reliable. They exist in everybody's machine. And so I'm pretty confident that if I use any of these particular choices, like Arial, for example, that my Arial will look like Arial on everybody's system. Macs, PC, it doesn't matter, because that's a pretty standard font. But there are fonts that exist, for example, on a Mac that don't exist on a PC, for an example. So if I used that, I'm currently on a Mac, if I used that font here when I create my web page, that font may not appear that way on a PC because that font file does not exist in the PC. And so if I'm creating a web page and I want to use a fancy font, then I want to find a way that I can create that fancy font so it's available no matter whose machine, and I don't have to rely on that individual's machine in order to ensure that the font looks the same. And here's how we can do that. I'm going to navigate to a site called Google. You might have heard of it, but in particular fonts.google.com. And Google gives us the ability to choose between, right now they have 1,800 font families or 1,800 fonts that we can utilize in our website. And because we are relying on Google to have those fonts available, as long as our user has access to the internet, which presumably they do because they're looking at our web page on the internet, then they can get these font files downloaded from Google onto the web page. That means me as a developer can be sure that everybody's site is looking at my page exactly the way I intended it. So let's see what I mean by that. Let me see if I can give you an example. All right. So back to my 07 H1, and it has an Arial, and it looks like Arial on everybody's page. But here in Google Fonts, you'll find that we can, let's click on Fonts. I think I need to have it wider to get where I'm expecting. Let's see, filters, there we go. I was expecting this pane, but I need the filters that kind of brought it forward. All right, so I'm going to type in, this is a wedding site that I want to create a really pretty cursive, romantic font for. So I'm going to do my wedding site. And you can see when we click on here that I'm getting copies of, or whatever this font would look like if this is the one I wanted to utilize. But that's not really what I wanted. I want something kind of cursive-y and, oh, look at the fancy. So I can click on fancy or any of these options to filter out between those 1,800 families. And now I'm getting a choice of 95. And surely if I scroll down, then I'll get the opportunity to see many different ones. And you can filter out different ways that you want to see it. Maybe handwritten. Let's try that. So I don't like it very much. So anyway, it gives you the ability to kind of scroll through and decide what one you want to end up with on your website. So I think this is the one I want. So I'm going to click on it. Clearly that font is not available on everybody's machine. And so if I want to be consistent across everybody that's looking at my page and have my wedding title look like this, I can utilize Google's font in order to do that. And see, here's how this works. So there's some examples of what it'll be looking like, and I can look at the different font sizes, etc., etc. And eventually, once I decide that's what I want to do, I'm going to click on Get Font. And it will give us different opportunities for how we need to do it. Now, I don't want to download it because I don't know quite how to work with a live server yet, or how I would install that on a server that's available to everybody on my webpage. But right now, let's just choose this option, Get Embed. And it gives us directions on how we can grab this font and use it on our web page. So the first thing it shows us here is embed this code in the head of your HTML tag. Remember that the head tag is for information for the browser. And so these links are providing the browser with information to go to Google Fonts and look up this family file, font family file, so that I can use it on my web page. So it says I can put this into my head tag, so I'm going to copy that code and I'm going to put it into the head tag. Now it's important that we put it before our style sheet because we have to have access to the file before we use it in the style sheet. So this is sort of an order matters thing. So I can't access it in my style sheet unless I've found that font file first. So first we put these links that are provided to us from Google, and then we add our style sheet afterwards. All right, so now what? So then I shrunk this up, so now it's down here. Now this tells us how we will use it. Now we have access to it. How do we use it in our web page? Well, we put it on our style sheet. And in this example, what they've done is they're just saying here is a class name. Well, we don't have to use the class name, but that's just what they're using as an example. But here's the properties that we can use in order to use their font. Now you recognize font family. There's the name of the font family. And here is where the browser knows how to find it. Perfect. So in other words, I'm going to grab this text and I'm going to put it in place of my font family here. So just like you use font family with font files that you have locally, we do the same thing, except they exist now at Google. So now that I've applied the information that I was provided, let's see, and all of a sudden I have a very nice fancy font. So this gives us the ability to have fonts that are available to us that we didn't already have, or to guarantee consistency across the internet world. All right, so let's look at the alternative way that we are provided to utilize this font. All right, so here is my link to the Google font. I'm going to comment it out. And notice that my font changed. My font changed. Why? Because if we look at the definition of font family, it says use this font. But since that font is no longer available because we've commented it out, then the browser is using the default cursive font that exists on the computer that I'm currently on, which looks like this, which again, it may be inconsistent, which is why we're using Google Fonts. But what I wanted to share with you is not necessarily that part, but if I comment out this link, or if I want to use this particular font on all of my HTML pages, then as it exists, I have to copy this code onto every single HTML page so that each one has access to this library. So what is the alternative? Well, if you look here, we were provided with this link. This is where we were. And then if I click on this one that says at import, I'm going to try this one as a conversation. It says that I can, it doesn't really say it directly, but I will give you the information. It says you can embed this in the head of your HTML, and this is a style. So instead of embedding that in the head, what I can do is take just this import, and apparently it's a CSS style because it is in between an open and closed style tag. So I'm going to copy that code, and I'm going to put it, you have to put it at the very top of your CSS page. You can't put it elsewhere. It has to be at the very top. So I'm going to put that import here at the very top. And let's see if that works. So now you can see that I did get that font back. So let me comment this out so you can see without, that's my current system's default cursive, or I'm now using the imported or Google Fonts library. And the advantage to doing it this way is now as long as I'm sharing this style sheet on multiple pages, then I have access to that import and I don't have to copy this link on every single page. Just by virtue of having linked to the style sheet now has the ability to link to the Google Fonts, and therefore I have access to the font that I want to change. So relatively easy and a very nice way to get some really nice fancy fonts which might be appropriate for your theme.